It was hot. Not just Las Vegas hot, where the air itself feels like it's leaning on you. It was showroom hot, 1,000 people breathing the same recycled air. The heat from the stage lights was a physical thing. You could feel it on your skin from the background. This was the Temple, the Las Vegas Hilton. And the man on stage was the reason everyone was here. He was a force of nature in a white jumpsuit. The suit itself was a work of art. Heavy, embroidered, studded with gems that caught the light and shattered it into 100 tiny pieces. It probably weighed 30 pounds, maybe more. And then there was the cape. A giant flowing piece of fabric lined with silk. It was part of the uniform, part of the spectacle. He was not just a singer anymore, he was a superhero. A king in his court, the band was a machine, a tight, powerful rhythm section that could turn on a dime. Their horns that could punch you in the chest, a choir of backup singers that gave the whole thing a gospel feel, even on the rock and roll numbers. They had been doing this for a long time, night after night, 2 shows a night sometimes. The routine was drilled into them. The setlist was mostly the same, the moves were mostly the same. But every night, for 2 hours, they had to make it feel like the first time. They had to make it feel like magic, and he was the magician. He was older now than when he first shook up the world. A little heavier. The sneer was mostly gone, replaced by a warm, sometimes tired smile. But the voice was still there. That voice could do anything. It could be a whisper. It could be a roar. It could break your heart with a ballad and then make you want to jump out of your seat with a rocker. Tonight, they were nearing the end of the show, the big finish. The audience was on its feet. They had heard the classics, they had seen the karate moves, he had handed out scarves to the women in the front row, wiping his sweat on them before draping them around their necks. It was a ritual. Everything was a ritual. Now it was time to burn the place down. Metaphorically, of course. The song started. It was a newer one for him, a cover, but he owned it completely. It wasn't a slow burn, it was an explosion from the first note. The opening riff from the guitar was raw and dirty. The drums came in like a locomotive. It was a song about a fever, about a temperature rising, about being a hunk of burning love. The lyrics were almost an afterthought. The feeling was everything. It was pure, uncut energy. He was working the stage, prowling from one side to the other. He'd kick, he'd punch the air. The crowd was a single entity, roaring back at him. This was the climax of the whole night, the point where all the energy in the room focused on one man, in one suit, singing one song. The song built and built. The band got louder. The backup singers wailed. He was giving it everything he had left. His face was slick with sweat. The jumpsuit was probably soaked through, but he kept pushing. That was the job. You give the people what they came for. You leave it all on the stage. As the song reached its final, crashing crescendo, he struck the pose. The classic pose. He would go down on one knee, his arm outstretched. The band would hold a final, screaming chord. The lights would all hit him at once, and he would spread his cape wide like a giant eagle. It was the money shot, the image that would be burned into everyone's memory. Part of the spectacle, part of the big Vegas production involved pyrotechnic. It was the 70s. Bigger was better, louder was better, more was better. At the front of the stage, there were small devices called flash pots. On cue, a roadie would trigger them, and they would shoot a plume of fire and smoke into the air. It was a simple, effective way to add a jolt of danger and excitement to the finale. A big bang to end the show. So, he went down, he hit the pose, the band hit the chord. The lights found him, he spread the cape, and the roadie hit the switch for the flash pot. Maybe the timing was a little off, maybe he was a little closer to the edge of the stage than usual. Maybe a draft of air from the casino's ventilation system pushed the flame just a few inches in the wrong direction. It doesn't matter why, it just matters what happened next. A spark from one of the flash pots leaped onto the bottom edge of the massive cape. For a split second, nobody noticed. The stage was filled with smoke and bright lights. The audience was blinded and deafened by the finale. The band was holding that last chord, watching him. But the spark didn't go out. It found purchase in the fabric. A tiny orange dot began to grow. Climbed up the silk lining of the cape, hungry for air. On stage with him, as always, was Charlie Hodge. Charlie was more than a band member. He was a friend, a right-hand man. He handed him his water, his towels, his scarves. He played guitar, he sang harmony. His main job was to be there for whatever the king needed. And he had a front row seat to everything. Charlie saw it first, a small flicker of orange against the white and gold. It wasn't part of the show, it wasn't a reflection from the lights, it was fire. Real fire. And it was attached to his friend. Panic is a strange thing. For most people, it freezes you. You see something wrong, and your brain just stops working for a second. But Charlie had been around the circus for a long time. His brain didn't freeze, it went into action. While the cord was still hanging in the air, while the audience was still screaming, while Elvis was still holding his superhero pose, Charlie dropped his guitar. He didn't toss it, he just let it go. It hit the stage with a thud. He grabbed a towel from a nearby stool. It was one of the towels used to wipe away sweat. It was probably damp. He ran towards Elvis. Not a casual walk, a dead run. From the audience's perspective, this was just strange. The song was over, but this guy was running at the star. What was happening? Was this part of the act? Elvis was still on one knee, his back partly to Charlie. He might have felt a sudden warmth, he might have smelled something strange, something other than sweat and cologne. But he was a professional. You don't break the pose, you hold it until the lights go down. Charlie didn't shout, he didn't scream, he just moved. He reached Elvis and started beating at the back of the cape with the wet towel. Slap, slap, slap. Frantic, desperate motions. He was trying to smother the flames before they could climb any higher, before they could reach the jumpsuit, before they could reach the man inside it. Another person reacted. J.D. Sumner, the bass singer with the impossibly low voice, was the leader of the Stamps Quartet, the backup gospel group. He saw what Charlie was doing. He saw the orange glow. He moved in from the other side, using his own large hands to beat at the flames. Now, Elvis knew something was wrong. He could feel them hitting him. He turned his head. He saw the look on Charlie's face. He saw the smoke. The cape was on fire. For any other performer, this would have been the end of the show. It would have been chaos. The star would be rushed off stage. The house lights would come up. Her stagehands would run out with fire extinguishers. The audience would be in a state of shock and confusion. But he wasn't any other performer. The flames were out. Charlie and JD had smothered them in a matter of seconds. The bottom of the iconic cape was now a blackened, smoldering mess. The smell of burnt fabric started to drift into the first few rows. The band, seeing the commotion, finally let the cord die. The sound in the showroom faded, replaced by an uneasy murmur from the crowd. They knew something had happened, but they weren't sure what. Elvis slowly rose to his feet. He turned around to look at the damage. He looked at Charlie, who was still holding the singed towel. He looked out at the thousands of confused faces staring back at him. He could have run. He could have been angry. He could have been scared. Instead, he walked to the microphone. He stood there for a beat, letting the tension hang in the air. He had the entire room in the palm of his hand. He leaned into the mic, and with a perfectly calm, slightly amused tone, he said, "Folks, I'm sorry if I was a little hot tonight, but the stage is on fire." Then he paused, a small smile playing on his lips. "Lord, I hope my suit don't catch." The room exploded, not with panic, but with laughter and applause. The tension just vanished. In one moment, with a couple of perfectly delivered lines, he had taken a genuinely dangerous situation and turned it into just another part of the show. He was in complete control. He had faced down real fire and made a joke about it. The crowd went wild. They weren't just cheering for the song anymore. They were cheering for him. For his coolness, for his grace under pressure. It was a moment of pure, unscripted charisma. It was proof that even when the show went wrong, he was still the king. He gestured to the band. They were all watching him, stunned. He gave them a nod, and they launched into the closing music. He took a final bow, the blackened cape hanging behind him like a battle scar. He walked off the stage, not with the hurried steps of a man who had just been on fire, but with the same confident swagger he always had. Backstage, the atmosphere was different. The adrenaline hit. People were shouting. The roadie in charge of the Flashbots was probably fearing for his job, if not his life. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, would not have been happy about his main attraction nearly being incinerated. They examined the cape. The damage was significant. It was a close call. A few more seconds and the fire could have easily spread to the jumpsuit. Those suits were made of heavy, synthetic materials. They would have gone up like a torch. What happened on stage in a matter of seconds could have been a genuine tragedy. He, however, was reportedly calm. He joked with Charlie about his quick thinking. He probably made sure the roadie didn't get fired. He understood that this was live entertainment. Things happen. Wires get crossed, cues get missed. Sometimes you catch on fire. The important thing was how you handled it, and he had handled it perfectly. The incident became a piece of Elvis lore, a story told by fans and band members for years to come. It was a perfect example of who he was in that era. He was trapped in the gilded cage of Las Vegas, performing a grueling schedule that would break a lesser man. He was battling his own demons, his health, and the pressures of being the most famous person on the planet. But when he stepped into the spotlight, none of that mattered. He was a master showman. The flashpots were used more carefully after that night. The finale was probably restaged to make sure there was a safer distance between the man and the pyrotechnics. But the danger was always there. Live performance is a high-wire act without a net. Every time a musician steps on stage, they are vulnerable. To technical failures, to their own mistakes, to the unpredictable nature of 1,000 things that can go wrong. That night showed his vulnerability. The superhero cape was, for a moment, just a piece of flammable cloth. The immortal king was, for a moment, just a man in a dangerous situation. But it also showed his strength, his ability to stare down chaos and not even blink, to take a moment of potential disaster and make it his own. The audience didn't leave that night talking about a concert that almost ended in tragedy. They left talking about the night the king joked about being on fire. He hadn't just put out the flames. He had controlled the narrative. It's a small moment in a legendary career. It's not as famous as the '68 comeback special or his first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. But in its own way, it says just as much about him. It shows the immense pressure of those Vegas years, the constant need to create a spectacle. It shows the loyalty of the people around him, like Charlie Hodge, who would literally jump into the fire for him. And it shows the incredible, unshakable coolness of the man at the center of the storm. He could have been burned. The show could have ended. But it didn't. He stood up, made a joke, and finished his work. Because that's what the king did. He delivered every single time, even when his own cape was on fire during the final notes of Burning Love.